I want to love you madly.
Peter Ivan McNeil was a working drummer in Los Angeles who built a respectable career over the course of many years. He played with the alternative rock band Cake from 2001 to 2004, joining after the recording of their album Comfort Eagle and replacing founding drummer Todd Roper. By the time McNeil joined, they were an established act with a dedicated following. He never appeared on any of Cake's studio albums during his time with the band, though he did show up in the music video for their song Love You Madly. Some sources indicate he may have contributed to their 2007 compilation B-Sides and Rarities and their 2011 album Showroom of Compassion, though his official tenure with the group ended in 2004. After leaving Cake, McNeil continued working as a session musician and built up an impressive list of credits. He played drums on Norah Jones's 2009 album The Fall, which was a commercial success. He also worked with singer-songwriter Mike Daughtry, the former frontman of Soul Coughing. He even played on a track called Meth vs. Chef 2 with Method Man and Raekwon, but then he threw it all away when he decided to become a monster. On Thanksgiving Day in 2009, McNeil attended a holiday gathering at a home in Laurel Canyon in Los Angeles. Among the other guests was a family visiting from Massachusetts with their 3-year-old daughter. There were several other children at the gathering that day. During the festivities, McNeil played a ball game with a little girl from Massachusetts. Later that evening, after the party had ended, the child asked her mother a question. The girl's mother said that her daughter asked why that man wanted to put his in her mouth. When the mother asked which man, the daughter identified McNeil as the person she had been playing ball with. 2 weeks after the Thanksgiving gathering, McNeil was volunteering at a Los Angeles school when he attempted to a 6-year-old girl. He was caught and charged with a misdemeanor. He was convicted and sentenced to 3 years in probation for that offense. The family from Massachusetts did not immediately press charges regarding what had happened at the Thanksgiving party, but 2 years later, their daughter brought up the incident again unprompted. The parents decided to go to the police. In January 2012, McNeil was arrested by the LAPD sexual assault detail and charged with 1 felony count of oral copulation and sexual penetration of a child under the age of 10. He was released on a $250,000 bail. The LAPD issued a public statement asking for help locating any additional children who may have been a victim of McNeil. They noted he had been arrested in 2009 on a separate case involving the attempted molestation of a young girl, referring to the incident at the school. McNeil's first trial ended in a mistrial after the jury could not reach a verdict. During the proceedings, his wife of 13 years filed for divorce, though she reportedly stated she still trusted McNeil with their children and would agree to joint custody. A second trial was held. The victim's mother testified in detail about what her daughter had told her after the Thanksgiving party. She described how the child had taken a metal thermos bottle, held it to her crotch, pushed it toward her mother's mouth, and moved her hips to demonstrate what McNeil had done to her. In March 2013, the jury found McNeil guilty on both charges. His sentencing came in December 2014. He was given 15 years to life in state prison. McNeil was also ordered to register as a sex offender for the rest of his life. Before being sentenced, McNeil had supporters speak on his behalf. His lawyer later released a statement saying that half a dozen friends and family members had testified to his character. The family declared that they stood strong with McNeil and called the conviction a gross failure of justice. They announced they would take their fight to a higher court until McNeil was free and his name was cleared. When news of the original arrest broke in 2012, Michael Dougherty told Fox News that he was devastated. He said there was nothing in his experience with McNeil that indicated he was capable of such a thing. He acknowledged that people say this in these situations, but asked everyone to remember that an innocent person's life could be ruined by such accusations. Today, Peter Ivan McNeil remains behind bars. Now in his mid-50s, he will not be eligible for parole until he has served at least 15 years. It's very possible that McNeil will spend the rest of his life in prison, given the nature of his crime. Even if he were ever released on parole, he would still be marked as a registered sex offender for life, a permanent consequence of the harm he inflicted. Roy Estrada was born in Santa Ana, California in 1943. He grew up playing bass guitar and singing, and by the early 1960s, he was fronting a band called Roy Estrada and the Rocketeers. After that band dissolved, Estrada became a founding member of a group called the Soul Giants, a local bar band playing covers around the Los Angeles area. In 1964, Frank Zappa joined the Soul Giants as a guitarist. He quickly took over creative control and transformed the group into something completely different. They became the Mothers of Invention. Estrada played bass and provided distinctive high falsetto vocals, which became a signature element of the band's unconventional sound. Estrada appeared on many of their most important records throughout the late 1960s, In 1969, Estrada left the Mothers of Invention to form a new band with another former Zappa associate named Lowell George. That band was Little Feat. Estrada played bass and sang backing vocals on their self-titled debut album in 1971, and their follow-up, Sailing Shoes, in 1972. After those two albums, Estrada quit Little Feat and joined Captain Beefheart's Magic Band, where Beefheart gave him the nickname Orejon, which means big ears in Spanish. Estrada continued working with Zappa intermittently through the mid-1970s and beyond. He also did session work for other artists over the years, including Ree Kuda on his debut solo album, Leo Kottke, and Van Dyke Parks. Overall, he was a highly reliable musician, whose talents were clearly in high demand by other artists. Of course, him being in this video means he obviously did something horrible, and that's what we'll be getting into now. On October 27, 1977, Estrada was convicted in Colorado of assault on a child. According to the Texas Department of Public Safety's Sex Offender Registry, this was his first conviction for a sex offense. The details of this case are not widely documented, and it's unclear how much time he served, or whether he served any time at all. On December 9, 1994, he was convicted again, this time in Orange County, California. The charge was lewd or lascivious acts with a child under the age of 14. He was sentenced to 6 years in prison and served that full sentence, being released around 2000. 2 years after his release in 2002, Estrada joined Mothers of Invention members Don Preston and Napoleon Murphy Brock to form a tribute band called the Grande Mothers. They played over 90 shows between 2002 and the late 2000s. Estrada also recorded a collaborative album called Hamburger Midnight in 2003 with former Mothers drummer Jimmy Carl Black, but it wouldn't take long before he slid back into his old ways. In March 2008, Estrada committed another offense. This time the victim was a female family member younger than 14 years old. The abuse took place in Tarrant County, Texas, and continued over an extended period. The victim's family was not aware that Estrada was a registered sex offender at the time. They only learned about his prior conviction after discovering what he had done to the child. In January 2012, Estrada pleaded guilty to a charge of continued abuse of a child. Under the terms of the plea agreement, he was sentenced to 25 years in prison with no possibility of parole. He was 60 years old at the time of the sentencing. Melody McDonald, a spokeswoman for the Tarrant County District Attorney's Office, told reporters that Estrada would be 93 years old before he would be eligible for release. Estrada was incarcerated in the Texas state prison system and held at the Wallace Pack Unit. He never made any public statements about his crimes. On August 14, 2025, Roy Estrada died while hospitalized in Conroe, Texas. He was 82 years old. He had been transferred from the prison's medical facility to a Free World hospital about 2 weeks before his death, and moved into the ICU 2 days before he died. Roy Estrada played an important role in the early success of Frank Zappa's legendary career, and became a reliable session musician, but his legacy is now completely tainted by the fact that he died as a convicted sex offender.
Everyone's gone to the moon.
And any distraction during that particular tune, ladies and gentlemen, was my fault because I attacked the drummer with a long pole when he was out of the camera shot. How about that then? Now then, ladies and gentlemen, it's all happening tonight, I'll tell you. Here is the one and only, let it all hang out, Mr. Jonathan King.
I preach, my dear friend, you are about to receive old John Barleycorn, nicotine, and the temptations of Eve.
Jonathan King was a fixture of the British pop scene for decades. In 1965, while still an undergraduate at Cambridge, King wrote and recorded a song called Everyone's Gone to the Moon, and it became a major hit. It reached number 4 in the UK charts and number 17 in the United States. The song sold over 4 million copies worldwide. By his early 20s, King had leveraged that success into a thriving career behind the scenes. He discovered and named the rock band Genesis in 1967 and helped launch their first album. If you're a Genesis fan and you haven't heard this album, don't bother, it's not worth it. This album is absolutely terrible. Even the band themselves hate it, and apparently the only reason why they haven't deleted it from their discography is because they can't, because they don't own the rights. Jonathan King still does. But apart from his fumble with Genesis, he was able to produce chart hits for groups like 10cc and the Bay City Rollers, and throughout the 1970s, he even scored several novelty hits of his own, under various stage names. During the 1980s, King also became a familiar face on British television, appearing on shows such as Top of the Pops, and by 1997, he was influential enough to produce Britain's winning entry for the Eurovision Song Contest, performed by Katrina and the Waves. In short, he was a well-known figure in music, respected for his knack for spotting talent and creating catchy tunes. But all of that acclaim came crashing down in the early 2000s. The dark turn in Jonathan King's story began to unfold decades after his initial success. In 2000, British police opened an investigation into King when a man came forward with allegations of sexual abuse dating back to the 1970s. As detectives dug deeper, more men emerged with similar accusations. A total of 27 individuals would eventually tell police that King would assault them as teenagers between 1969 and 1989. King was first arrested in November 2000 in connection with these historic abuse claims. He was freed on bail with £150,000 posted. Notably, $50,000 of that was put up by Simon Cowell, a testament to how much trust some in the industry still placed in King at the time. However, as further allegations surfaced, King was arrested again in January 2001 to face additional charges. Behind the facade of his music career, a very different picture was emerging. One of a man who had used his celebrity status to prey on vulnerable young fans. In September 2001, Jonathan King stood trial at the Old Bailey in London, and the allegations of abuse were laid bare in court. After a 2-week trial, a jury found him guilty of multiple sexual offences against underage boys. Specifically, King was convicted on several counts of indecent assault and other serious crimes committed against 5 boys who were between 14 and 15 years old at the time of the abuse in the mid-1980s. The judge sentenced King to 7 years in prison for these crimes. The verdict made headlines across Britain, the fall of a pop mogul who had once been a household name. Although King faced many accusations, he was acquitted of additional charges in a subsequent trial later in 2001. Several other planned trials were also dropped, in part because one accused's testimony was found unreliable regarding his age at the time, but the core conviction stood firm. King's guilt was now a matter of public record, and his long career in music was effectively over. From that moment, he was no longer known as a hitmaker. He was branded as a convicted child sex offender. Jonathan King served about half of his 7-year sentence behind bars and was released on parole in March 2005. Upon his release, he remained defiant and showed no remorse for his actions. In fact, he described his 3.5 years in prison as, quote, absolutely brilliant, insisting that he was, quote, 100% innocent of the crimes despite the jury's verdict. Even years after his conviction, King never wavered from his claim of innocence. When asked by a newspaper in 2012 if he had anything to apologize for from his past, King responded, quote, the only apology I have to say is that I was good at seduction. That unapologetic stance, essentially bragging about his ability to lure victims, showed the complete lack of remorse he exhibited. Free from prison but now a registered sex offender, King set about trying to defend his reputation in his own eccentric ways. In 2008, he released a bizarre self-produced film online titled Vile Pervert the Musical, in which he played multiple characters and reenacted his trial from his own point of view. The film presented King's version of events and protested his innocence, but it was widely seen as an outrageous attempt to rewrite the narrative.
This has been one of the most shocking cases I have ever encountered. Shocking because I keep using words like vehicule and apprehended that only occur in cop speak and do not exist in the real world. Shocking because my delivery is as wooden as the words are stupid. Shocking because this pathetic little man gets a kick out of appearing on courtroom steps all over the world and making identical statements like this, which are recorded on video so that he can watch them in his retirement in a bungalow home on the south coast of Great Britain. But most shocking of all, because I'm only ever photographed from the waist up, whereas I'm actually far more interesting from the waist down.
Far from rehabilitating his image, these actions only reinforced the public view of King as unrepentant and out of touch with the gravity of his crimes. Many years later, Jonathan King found himself back in the legal spotlight when new allegations resurfaced in 2015. Police in Surrey reinvestigated historic sex abuse claims related to a 1970s teen disco, where King allegedly targeted minors, as part of an inquiry called Operation Ravine. This led to King being charged in 2017 with 18 additional sexual offences involving 9 boys aged 14 to 15, said to have occurred between 1970 and 1986. King, by then in his 70s, once again proclaimed his innocence, and the case went to trial in the summer of 2018. However, after several weeks of proceedings, the trial collapsed. A judge found that there had been, quote, fundamental failures by the police in disclosing evidence to the defense, errors so severe that a fair trial was deemed impossible. The jury was dismissed, and the court stayed the prosecution, meaning those charges were dropped and would not be pursued further. Surrey police publicly apologized for the mishandling of the case, and no retrial was scheduled. In the end, Jonathan King avoided any new convictions from the 2018 trial, but that collapse did little to restore his reputation. By that point, his name was already synonymous with scandal due to the earlier convictions. Jonathan King is now 81 years old, and his time as a successful figure in the entertainment industry, who also discovered what will go on to become one of the most successful bands of all time in Genesis, is now almost completely forgotten due to the crimes he committed that led to him to becoming a convicted sex offender. Gurmeet Ram Rahim Singh built an unusual public identity that blended spiritual leadership with pop stardom. As the head of Dera Sacha Surda, he claimed tens of millions of followers across northern India, many of whom treated him as a living saint. At the same time, he aggressively pushed himself as a musician and entertainer. Beginning in the early 2010s, Ram Rahim released a steady stream of self-produced music albums, performing as a singer, lyricist, and composer. His songs mix basic devotional messages with pop, rock, and electric sounds, often repeating slogans tied directly to his teachings. Titles like Love Charger and Highway Love Charger became closely associated with his public image, with lyrics comparing divine love to everyday objects in a way that appealed to young followers. His music videos leaned heavily into spectacle. Ram Rahim would appear in elaborate costumes covered in sequins and jewelry, riding motorcycles, dancing with backup performers, and singing to massive crowds made up almost entirely of his devotees. These releases were not marketed in traditional ways. Instead, they were distributed through Dera networks, concerts, and mass gatherings, where followers were encouraged to treat his music as both entertainment and spiritual instruction. While critics in the broader public often mocked the songs as bizarre or low quality, they served their purpose inside the sect by reinforcing loyalty and portraying Ram Rahim as a charismatic modern figure rather than a reclusive religious leader. That same strategy carried over into film. Starting in 2015, Ram Rahim starred in a series of movies beginning with MSG The Messenger, where he essentially played a heroic version of himself. In these films, he was depicted as a superhuman figure fighting crime, curing social problems, and defeating villains through a mix of martial arts, music, and spiritual authority. Screenings were often packed with Dera followers, turning theatres into extensions of his rallies. Although professional reviews widely panned the films as vanity projects, they further strengthened his cult of personality. While Rahim was presenting himself as a musician, an actor, and moral reformer, serious criminal cases were moving slowly through the courts. In 2002, an anonymous letter sent to authorities accused him of raping female disciples at the Dera headquarters. The letter was later published by journalist Ram Chanda, who was shot and killed that same year. Another former Dera manager, Ranjit Singh, was murdered months earlier. Investigators eventually alleged that both killings were carried out to silence critics and whistleblowers connected to the rape accusations. Despite these cases, Ram Rahim remained free for years, protected by his influence, political connections, and the unwavering support of his followers. Additional allegations surfaced over time, including claims that Ram Rahim had ordered or encouraged the forced castration of male followers as part of a supposed spiritual practice. By the mid-2010s, multiple investigations were active against him, yet he continued releasing music and promoting films. His entertainment output helped maintain an image of confidence and authority, even as legal pressure increased behind the scenes. That illusion finally collapsed in August 2017, when a special court found him guilty of raping 2 women. The verdict triggered immediate unrest. Tens of thousands of followers had gathered near the courthouse, and when the conviction was announced, large-scale violence broke out across parts of Haryana and Punjab. The followers clashing with the police left dozens dead and hundreds injured. The scale of the chaos drew national outrage and intense scrutiny of local authorities who had failed to prevent the build-up. Days later, Ram Rahim was sentenced to 20 years in prison. In 2019, he was also convicted for his role in the murder of journalist Ram Chandler and received a life sentence, although a later conviction related to the murder of Ranjit Singh was overturned on appeal. The rape convictions and the journalist murder sentence ensured he would remain incarcerated. Even in prison, Ram Rahim did not fully disappear from public life. Beginning in 2020, he was repeatedly granted parole and furlough, sometimes for weeks at a time. During these periods, he resumed releasing music, recording new songs and videos that were uploaded online and quickly attracted millions of views. These releases sparked backlash, with critics questioning how a convicted rapist was able to continue operating as a public entertainer. Government officials defended the parole as routine, while courts later imposed tighter conditions following public pressure. As of now, Rahim is still in prison, and the case related to the alleged castrations is still pending. His cult's website still features him prominently to this day, and his followers still revere him. His films and music are still online, and the concerts he held attracted hundreds of thousands of people who genuinely believed he was a divine messenger, and none of them knew, or perhaps refused to believe, just what was happening behind closed doors. Mona Fandey was born Nur Masna Ismail in 1956 in Malaysia. She got into singing and dancing early, and by her early 20s, she had picked a stage name and was trying to make it as a pop star. In 1987, she put out an album called Diana. Her husband, Muhammad Rahman, bankrolled the whole thing and got her booked on TV, but it didn't work. The album flopped and her career went nowhere. But Mona didn't disappear. She and her husband started calling themselves Bomos, which are traditional Malay shamans who claim to communicate with spirits and offer supernatural help. This kind of belief is deeply rooted in parts of Malaysian society, and Mona found plenty of clients willing to pay for it. Rich business people came to her hoping to get richer. Politicians from UNMO, the ruling party, showed up looking for an edge over their rivals. The money was good. She ended up with multiple mansions, a fleet of luxury cars, and habits of staying in 5-star hotels. She finally had the lifestyle of a celebrity, just not through the path she originally planned. In 1993, a politician named Mazlan Idris sought her out. He was a state assemblyman for Batu Talam in Pahang, ambitious and apparently willing to pay serious money for supernatural assistance. Mona told him she could make him invincible using a talisman and some items she claimed had once belonged to former Indonesian president. The price was 2.5 million ringgit, which at the time worked out to roughly $500,000. Mazlan paid 500,000 ringgit up front and signed over 10 land titles as collateral for the rest. On July 2, 1993, he showed up at a property in Rao Pahang for the ritual. Mona had him lie on the floor, placed flowers on his body, and told him to close his eyes and wait for money to fall from the sky. What came instead was an axe. Her assistant, Juraimi Hassan, struck him in the neck. According to testimony at trial, he was acting on orders from Mona's husband. They dismembered the body into 18 pieces and buried it in a pit beneath the storeroom of an unfinished house on the property, then sealed the whole thing with cement. The next day, Mona went on a shopping spree in Kuala Lumpur. She paid 125,000 ringgit in cash for a Mercedes-Benz, picked up a cell phone, gold jewelry, sofas, kitchen cabinets, a TV and a video recorder. A couple of weeks later, she checked into a hotel for a facelift and a nose job. All of it was paid for with the same money Mazlan had withdrawn from his accounts before he died. When Mazlan stopped showing up to party functions, people started asking questions. Police didn't have much to go on at first. Then, on July 13th, Juraimi got picked up on an unrelated drug charge. During questioning, he confessed and told officers where to find the body. They dug it up on July 22nd. Mona, her husband, and Juraimi were all arrested and charged with murder. The trial started in September 1994 and ran for 65 days, with 76 witnesses testifying. It was one of the last jury trials held in Malaysia before the system was scrapped in 1995. Prosecutors said greed was the motive and pointed to everything Mona had bought in the days after the killing. Juraimi testified against his employers and laid out exactly what happened. Mona's husband tried to argue that Mazlan actually owed them money for the occult items, but the jury wasn't having it. They came back with a unanimous guilty verdict after just 70 minutes. What stood out during the trial was Mona herself. She treated the whole thing like a public appearance. She showed up every day in bright, flashy outfits, smiled constantly, and posed for photographs, like she was walking a red carpet. At one point, she looked around the courtroom and said, quote, "Looks like I have many fans." When the judge handed down the death sentence on February 9th, 1995, she thanked the court and blew kisses to the crowd. All three of them appealed. The federal court rejected the appeals in 1999, and the Pardons Board turned down their clemency request. On the morning of November 2nd, 2001, they were hanged at Kajang prison. Mona had reportedly spent her years on death row, reading the Quran and praying 5 times a day. According to prison officials, she stayed calm right up until the end. Just before they put the hood over her head, she said, quote, "I will never die." She was 45 years old when she was executed. Her case played a role in Malaysia's decision to get rid of jury trials altogether. In 2018, a horror film loosely based on her story called Dukun, finally got released after being banned for over a decade. Police also suspected her of being involved in other disappearances over the years, including 5 housemaids who had worked for her in the late 1980s and a family of 3 whose remains turned up on land her husband owned. None of that ever led to additional charges. Mona Fandey had originally wanted to be a famous singer, but when that didn't work out, she decided to become a con woman who tricked rich people out of their money, until one day, when out of nowhere, she decided that tricking people wasn't good enough to get their money and decided to switch to cold-blooded murder. Ronald Heron was born in 1982 and grew up in Brooklyn's Gowanus Houses, a public housing project in the Boerum Hill neighborhood. When he was 12 years old, he watched a police officer shoot and kill his childhood friend, Nicholas Haywood Jr., who had been holding a toy gun while playing cops and robbers. That incident shaped him in ways that would define his future. By the late 1990s, Heron had risen through the ranks of a Bloods gang faction called the Murderous Mad Dogs. The gang controlled the crack and heroin trade across the Gowans and nearby Wyckoff Gardens housing developments. Heron became their leader, and under his rule, rivals had a tendency to end up dead. His first murder came in 2001. Frederick Brooks was a local drug dealer, and on June 16th of that year, Heron shot and killed him. He was arrested, went to trial, but walked free. Witnesses who had seen the killing refused to take the stand. Prosecutors later determined that Heron and his associates had threatened them into silence. With that acquittal, Heron had learned something dangerous. He could get away with it. He went to prison anyway on drug trafficking charges and served time until 2007. While locked up at Southport Prison, he climbed even higher in the gang hierarchy. When he got out, he was ready to reclaim his territory. In May 2008, Richard Russo was killed inside an elevator at Wyckoff Gardens. Witnesses said there was some kind of altercation before a gun came out, and Russo was shot dead. A year later, Heron chased down a rival drug dealer named Victor Zapata through the courtyard of the same housing complex and killed him too. Through all of this, Heron had developed a parallel interest. He wanted to be a rapper. He took the name Ra Diggs and started uploading music videos to YouTube through a channel he called Vanguardent. He collaborated with established artists like Uncle Murder and Whack a Flock of Flame, forming a group called the Murder Team. His track, Eulogy, racked up over 1 million views. The problem was that Heron's lyrics were confessional in a very literal way. In his songs, he rapped about ordering hits, about shootings, and about getting revenge. In one track, he referenced being shot 5 times and noted that 2 days later, the shooter was dead. It was later confirmed that this matched a real incident from 2000, when Heron survived being shot by a rival and his associates killed that person within 48 hours. In another song, he rapped that the man who shot him should have aimed for the head, because Heron was capable of ordering someone's death from a hospital bed. He also bragged openly about escaping justice. In one song, he mentioned going up against the Brooklyn District Attorney's Office twice and never losing. In October 2010, police stopped Heron outside a nightclub on what started as minor charges, but when they searched his car, they found a loaded firearm and military-grade body armor. The traffic stop sets everything in motion. Federal investigators began building a case against him, and in 2012, he was indicted on 21 counts, including 3 murders, drug distribution, robbery, and racketeering. The 5-week trial that followed in 2014 became notable for how prosecutors used Heron's own music against him. They played his videos in court, brought in a linguistics expert to analyze his lyrics, and argued that his songs weren't fiction at all, but actual accounts of crimes he had committed. One of the more unusual pieces of testimony came from Saquon Wallace, a fellow drug dealer who had worked under Heron. Wallace told the court that Heron had once advised him to dress as a woman in order to get close to a target. Wallace testified that he had put on a wig, lipstick, and makeup, then walked outside a party until the man he was looking for walked out. When he did, Wallace opened fire and killed him. More than 50 witnesses testified against Heron over the course of the trial. Uncle Murder took the stand for the defense and tried to argue the rap lyrics shouldn't be taken literally, and that artists exaggerate for effect. He pointed out that he himself had once rapped about refusing to see a doctor after getting shot in the head, when in reality, he did receive medical treatment. The jury didn't buy the argument. On June 26, 2014, Heron was convicted on all 21 counts. Before his sentencing, he addressed the courtroom and insisted the whole thing was theatre. He called himself the scourge of righteousness, mocked the prosecution, and said even the most incompetent lawyer could have secured a guilty verdict given the way the case was presented. He told the judge he could hand down 10 life sentences if he wanted. Heron said he was only going to die once anyway. The judge gave him 12 life terms, plus 105 years. He was sent to ADX Florence, the federal supermax facility in Colorado, where inmates spend 23 hours a day in isolation with almost no contact. He appealed his conviction in 2019, arguing that using rap lyrics as evidence violated his First Amendment rights. His appeal was rejected. It was ruled that while free speech is protected, it doesn't shield someone from having their words used as evidence when those words describe crimes they actually committed. Richard McCroskey was born on December 26, 1988, and grew up in Hayward, California. He was bullied throughout his childhood for being overweight and having red hair, and dropped out of 2 different high schools. His father, a rock guitarist, introduced him to groups like Metallica and the Insane Clown Posse. Richard spent most of his time alone in his bedroom, designing websites and producing music on his computer. He became deeply involved in the subgenre of hip-hop called horrorcore, which set lyrics about violence and murder to hip-hop beats. Under the name Psycho Sam, he recorded songs with titles like My Dark Side, Sick in the Brain, and I Hate This World. In one track, he rapped about killing people slowly and watching them take their final breath. Through MySpace, McCroskey connected with a 16-year-old girl from Farmville, Virginia, named Emma Niederbrock. Emma was also into horrorcore. She went by the name Ragdoll online and had been homeschooled since middle school. Her mother, Deborah Kelly, was a sociology professor at Longwood University who specialized in criminal justice studies, including courses on homicide. Emma's father, Mark Niederbrock, was a Presbyterian minister. The two were separated but remained involved in Emma's life. Emma and McCroskey talked constantly for about a year, sometimes spending hours on the phone each day. McCroskey believed she was his girlfriend.
Alright, so you wanted a video, and you made me videos, so... And he said please, so I'll make you this video, even though I'm not gonna like do anything, because my room's kind of dirty, and yeah, I don't want to show you my dirty room. But this video is for Emma, because you just told me to say your name, so I don't know. I'll make you another video once clean, I promise. Unless you just want to like see my wall, because that's not dirty, but behind me is dirty, so that's not good. Alright, this video is for you, Emma. The ragdoll, amazing ragdoll, and I really don't know what to do for you on video, so I guess I'll like show you my room a little bit if that's what you want to see. First off, we got my door. And then we got my addiction for energy drinks, and then we got my small underground CD collection going on right here, and then we got my wall of awesomeness that I call it. Lots of posters and flyers and a Hatchet Man charm and random stuff. A hatchet. Oh no, the battery's dying.
He saved up money and bought a plane ticket to Virginia to meet her in person for the first time. On September 6, 2009, he flew out to stay at the Kelly home. 6 days later, on September 12, the group traveled to Southgate, Michigan for a horrorcore festival called Strictly for the Wicked. Emma, her friend Melanie Wells, both of Emma's parents, and McCroskey himself all made the 16-hour drive together. The festival went fine. Friends who saw the group there said everyone seemed happy, but at some point, during or after the trip, something shifted. According to reports that emerged later, Richard McCroskey found text messages on Emma's phone from a man she had spoken to at the festival. He confronted her about it and she got angry, accusing him of invading her privacy. Other accounts suggest Emma had simply grown cold towards McCroskey when she spent real time with him, distancing herself and excluding him alongside Melanie. Whatever the precise trigger, McCroskey did not handle the rejection well. In the early hours of September 15, 2009, while the 3 women were asleep, McCroskey took a wood-splitting maul and attacked them one by one. First Melanie Wells on the couch, then Deborah Kelly upstairs, then Emma in her downstairs bedroom. None of them woke up before it was over. After killing the 3 women, McCroskey stayed in the house. He remained there for 2 days as the bodies began to decompose. On September 17th, Emma's father, Mark Niederbrock, stopped to check on everyone. McCroskey attacked him with the same tool the moment he walked in. At some point during those days, McCroskey recorded a video of himself in the house. In it, he acknowledged what he had done and said he knew he would have to pay for it. He considered killing himself, but didn't go through with it. Instead, He stole Mark Niederbrock's Honda and tried to leave. At 4 in the morning on September 18th, he got the car stuck in a ditch. A tow truck driver arrived to help and noticed that McCroskey smelled terrible. A deputy on the scene gave him a ticket for driving without a license, but had no idea what had happened. Later that day, after Melanie's mother called police repeatedly because she had not heard from her daughter, officers finally entered the home and found the 4 bodies. McCroskey had already made it to Richmond International Airport. He was planning to fly home to California. Police found him sleeping in the baggage claim area and arrested him without incident. When a reporter asked him why he did it, McCroskey said, "Jesus told me to do it." His sister Sarah told the press she couldn't believe it. She described her brother as passive, someone who wouldn't kill a spider if you asked him to. Neighbors said the same thing. People in the horrorcore community who knew him called him a good kid. One friend who ran a horrorcore record label said if McCroskey was guilty, he would be completely shocked. McCroskey was charged with 4 counts of capital murder and 2 counts of first-degree murder. He faced the death penalty if convicted at trial. In September 2010, he accepted a plea agreement and was sentenced to 4 consecutive life terms in prison. His attorney said the decision came down to evidence. 4 bodies were hard to argue against. McCroskey showed little emotion during the hearing and gave only simple yes and no answers. He waived his right to appeal. Witnesses said he smirked as he was led to the van that would take him to prison. A former cellmate later revealed that McCroskey has expressed regret and does not talk about his crimes with pride. But remorseful or not, nothing will ever change the fact that 4 people brutally had their lives taken away from them by him. And that's the end of the video, folks. If you found this video interesting, be sure to like, leave a comment, subscribe if you're new, and consider supporting me on Patreon. All patrons get early ad-free access to videos, and higher tiers get their names on the board and a shout out. I'd like to thank all of my patrons for their support, especially those whose names you're seeing on screen now, particularly Sonny Hauser, Charlie Boyle, Bailey Cosmic Black Metal 96, Mimi, Pizza Guy 111, Lagged Into Sunlight, KJ Musical, Losanna, Xander Stewart, Brandon Field, Anthony B. Fernandez, John Blood Smells Like Duty, Helen Korn, Kyle, BAN, Brendan O'Connell, Adam Clayton, Count Nigula, Danny Jade, Paul Mendoza, Squishy, Alex Christmas, Bella Schwartz, Belle Siegel, Stimulate, Inquisitor Zarius, and Dick the Cock Johnson and the Woodmaster at WrestleMania X69 or maybe not dude. Thank you very much for watching and I'll see you all next time. Goodbye.